Where does your soul go when you die? It's a question humans have been asking for thousands of years, but most of the answers we give are stories rather than explanations. If we want to understand it honestly, the first thing we need to do is define what we mean by soul. Most people imagine it as some invisible essence inside us, a little spark that somehow survives the body when it stops working. But from a scientific point of view, that idea doesn't fit with what we know about the world. Physics, biology, neuroscience, they all describe reality in terms of things we can measure, things that interact, and things that follow predictable rules. They don't leave room for an extra ingredient called soul that exists independently of the body. Think about your brain for a moment. You could imagine it like a very complicated computer. Every thought you have, every memory, every feeling is like software running on hardware. When the computer is on, it works, it plays games, sends emails, or maybe even runs a simulation. But if the power is cut, the software stops running. It doesn't suddenly drift off into the air or float to some invisible cloud of consciousness. The programs just end. Your brain is nothing like a simple computer, of course. It's billions of neurons firing in intricate patterns, creating layers upon layers of activity that give rise to everything you experience as yourself. But here's the crucial point: those patterns only exist because of the physical structure of your brain. Neurons connect in very specific ways. Chemicals flow, electrical signals travel, and tiny molecular machines keep everything running. Remove that structure, and the patterns vanish. When your body dies, your neurons stop firing. Your brain's chemistry collapses, and the organized activity that creates consciousness comes to an end. This doesn't mean your atoms disappear. They don't. Energy is conserved. The atoms in your body will eventually become part of the soil, the air, a tree, or maybe even a star one day. But the subjective experience, the sense of I am me, that seems so essential to who you are. That is almost certainly gone. It doesn't float somewhere. It doesn't continue in some hidden realm. The thing that experiences reality simply ceases to exist. That idea is terrifying to most people because our brains are wired to resist it. We evolved to survive in a world full of threats, and to do that we built stories. Stories about continuity, about justice, about life after death. They reduce fear. They comfort us. They make the terrifying unknown seem navigable. And this is why humans cling so tightly to the idea of the soul. It's a psychological tool, a coping mechanism for the ultimate mystery we cannot yet measure or explain. But if you take off the comforting stories and look at the universe honestly, what you find is still extraordinary. Your consciousness, fragile and finite as it is the result of billions of years of evolution and the precise interaction of matter in your brain. You are the product of atoms, molecules, neurons, and physics. And yet this arrangement has created something capable of asking, where does my soul go? That in itself is remarkable, a spark of self-awareness arising from the universe. Let's try a thought experiment to make this more concrete. Imagine the ship of Theseus. It's a ship that, over time, has every single plank replaced. Eventually, none of the original material remains. Is it still the same ship? It seems like a simple question, but it gets complicated the moment you try to pin it down. Now imagine applying that idea to your brain. Every second, billions of neurons are firing. Molecules move, old cells die, new ones grow. Even the atoms themselves are replaced over the years. Are you the same person you were yesterday? Are you the same person you will be next year? Your consciousness, your sense of self, is essentially a pattern. It's a network of interactions, memories, and electrical signals organized in a precise way. But here's the crucial part. Patterns are not independent of the medium that carries them. A song exists as sound waves or digital files, but without the speaker or the storage medium, it disappears. The same is true for your consciousness. If the physical structure of your brain is destroyed, the pattern that makes you no longer exists. There is no mechanism in physics or biology that allows that pattern to continue somewhere else, floating through space or time. It simply ceases. This is a terrifying idea because it directly challenges the stories we've been telling ourselves for thousands of years. Humans are natural storytellers, and our brains evolved to find meaning, continuity, and causality in the world. We find comfort in imagining that the self is something more than just a pattern of neurons, that it can survive death or float to some spiritual plane. But science doesn't require comfort. Science requires honesty. And the honest answer, as far as we can measure and observe, is that when the brain stops functioning, the self stops functioning too. Some people turn to quantum mechanics and say, maybe consciousness is something more than neurons. Maybe it exists as a quantum state that somehow survives death. Quantum mechanics is strange, no doubt. Particles exist in superpositions. Things can be connected at a distance, and measurement changes outcomes. But the brain is not a perfectly isolated quantum system. It's warm, wet, and constantly interacting with its environment. Quantum states are fragile. They collapse almost immediately in such conditions. There is no experimental evidence suggesting that consciousness escapes the physical structure of the brain. While it's tempting to hope for a loophole in physics, the equations don't support one. That's the strange tension humans live with. Our brains are wired to imagine continuity, but the universe is impartial. It doesn't care about comfort. The ship of Theseus thought experiment shows us the hard truth patterns require a medium. The medium is your living brain. When the medium is gone, the pattern ends. The atoms and molecules remain, the energy remains, but the subjective experience, the self-aware observer, disappears. It doesn't go anywhere. And yet, the fact that this pattern exists at all is extraordinary. The universe, through billions of years of evolution and random chance, has produced a structure capable of self-reflection, capable of asking, where do I go when I die? That spark, brief, fragile, and fleeting, is consciousness itself. You are a temporary arrangement of matter that can ponder the infinite. In that sense, the impermanence of the self doesn't diminish its value. It magnifies it. Your life is a singular event in the history of the universe, a brief window where the cosmos experiences itself. Some people hope that quantum mechanics might offer a way for consciousness to survive death. After all, quantum physics is strange, even mind-bending. Particles can exist in multiple states at once. They can influence each other instantly across vast distances, and the act of observation itself affects outcomes. It almost feels like the universe is hinting at something mysterious beyond ordinary physics, maybe even something that could allow the soul to persist. But when we examine this idea carefully, the hope begins to crumble. The key reason is that quantum states are extremely delicate. They require isolation from the environment to persist, because any interaction, any jostle of molecules, any collision with a particle causes what physicists call decoherence. The state collapses into one outcome, and the superposition disappears. Now consider the brain. It is a warm, wet, noisy environment constantly interacting with the world. Neurons fire, chemicals diffuse, molecules bump into each other. Under these conditions, maintaining a quantum state capable of encoding consciousness is almost impossible. The patterns that make up your thoughts, memories, and sense of self are macroscopic. They are made of billions of interacting particles, and quantum effects average out long before they could influence consciousness. This is not to say that quantum mechanics doesn't influence biology at all. There are some fascinating studies suggesting that certain processes in photosynthesis, bird navigation, and even smell may involve quantum effects. But these are small, isolated effects that assist life processes. They are nothing like the kind of coherent, isolated quantum state that would be required to carry consciousness beyond death. The mathematics of quantum physics gives no support for the idea that your mind, your awareness, or your soul could somehow tunnel out of your brain and continue to exist elsewhere. Science doesn't prove the soul can exist. Science can only tell us what mechanisms are possible, what has evidence, and what fits the laws of nature as we understand them. And the mechanisms for an immortal consciousness, independent of the body, are simply absent. Our minds evolved to handle survival and problem solving, not to confront the infinite, so they naturally invent comforting stories when faced with this silence. We cling to the idea of life after death, because the alternative, the possibility that consciousness ends, is deeply unsettling. Yet the absence of a mechanism doesn't diminish the miracle of consciousness while it exists. Even if it is entirely physical, it is astonishing that matter can organize in such a way as to produce subjective experience. The firing of neurons, the flow of ions, the exchange of molecules, all combine to create something that can reflect, imagine, and ask questions about its own existence. Your awareness, your thoughts, and your sense of self are temporary, yes, but they are also profound. You are the universe becoming aware of itself, even if only for a brief period. This is the paradoxical beauty that Feynman loved to explore. The universe is impartial, indifferent, and yet it allows something as fleeting and magnificent as consciousness to emerge. You may not survive in any personal sense, but for a while, the cosmos experiences the universe through you. That is both humbling and awe-inspiring. The laws of physics are cold and precise, but the phenomena they produce, like life and thought, are extraordinary. Recognizing that your consciousness is temporary, fragile, and entirely tied to the physical world does not diminish its significance. On the contrary, it makes every moment of awareness infinitely more valuable, because it is unique, fleeting, and utterly yours. Humans struggle with the concept of the soul because it touches the most uncomfortable unknown we can imagine, our own end. From an evolutionary perspective, our brains were never designed to handle absolute finitude. They were designed to survive, to find patterns, and to make sense of the world so we could live long enough to pass on our genes. Death, in all its finality, is an interruption to that program. It is absolute, permanent, and irreversible. Our minds naturally rebel against it. This rebellion takes the form of stories. Every culture, no matter how different, has developed myths about life after death, spirits or immortal essences. These stories are not arbitrary. They serve a psychological function. They provide continuity in the face of discontinuity. They give us hope and reduce fear. But from a scientific perspective, they are exactly that, stories. They are attempts by the brain to explain something it cannot measure, something it cannot predict, and something it cannot control. The difficulty lies in the nature of consciousness itself. Consciousness is subjective, first person and immediate. It is not something we can measure directly with instruments. We can measure neural activity, blood flow, or electrical signals in the brain, but we cannot measure what it feels like to be someone else, or what it feels like to be you. This makes the question of the soul uniquely tricky. Science is extremely good at explaining observable phenomena, at finding patterns, and at predicting outcomes. But the soul, if it exists as the self-aware you, leaves no trace. It is invisible, intangible, and unrepeatable. This is why humans struggle. Our brains are pattern-seeking machines. We want to see continuity where there is none. We want to believe that our sense of self, the collection of memories, thoughts, and feelings that make us unique, can survive the collapse of the physical structure that generates it. And yet, when we examine the facts honestly, the pattern depends entirely on the medium, the living brain. When the brain stops, the pattern ends. There is no leftover, no floating essence, no consciousness in hiding. It's a hard truth, and it feels counterintuitive because our minds are built to resist it. The struggle also comes from our ability to imagine the infinite. We can picture time stretching endlessly, universes expanding forever, and our consciousness persisting without end. But the reality is that consciousness is finite, fragile, and intimately tied to the body. Our imagination gives us hope for immortality, but it also creates anxiety when it realizes that there is no mechanism for survival. The tension between what we feel should be possible and what the universe actually allows is deeply uncomfortable. Yet there is a strange beauty in this struggle. By confronting the impermanence of the self, we begin to appreciate the miracle of consciousness. You exist for a brief moment, aware and thinking, and that is extraordinary. Your thoughts, your experiences, and your awareness are unique arrangements of matter and energy in a universe that does not guarantee such phenomena. Recognizing the limits of what survives does not diminish life, it magnifies it. Every decision, every experience, every interaction gains intensity when you understand that it is fleeting, irreplaceable, and profoundly real. The human struggle with the soul is not a failure of understanding. It is the natural reaction of a brain designed for survival, faced with a reality that is far more vast, indifferent, and precise than our instincts and stories can comfortably contain. In confronting this struggle, we touch something almost sacred. The realization that consciousness exists at all is a miracle, however temporary it may be. The universe gave us this spark, and in this brief, finite moment, we are alive, aware and capable of seeing reality as it truly is. That is a gift science allows us to recognize, and it is far more astonishing than any myth about immortality. Science gives us a clearer picture of what actually happens when we die. When the heart stops beating, blood no longer delivers oxygen to cells. Neurons in the brain, which depend on that oxygen, begin to fail within minutes. Electrical signals that generate thought and consciousness fade and eventually cease. The organized patterns of activity that make up memory, perception, and self-awareness unravel. In other words, the machinery that produces the experience of being you stops working. There is no evidence that these patterns persist independently. Consciousness, as far as we can measure, is entirely a product of this living, functioning system. At the same time, the matter and energy that make up your body do not vanish. Physics tells us that energy is conserved. The atoms in your cells, the chemical bonds, the ions that once fired through neurons, all of it transforms and becomes part of the environment. You literally become part of the air, the soil, and the wider ecosystem. In a sense, the material components of your existence continue to interact with the universe. But this is fundamentally different from personal experience. The self-aware observer, the I, that perceives reality, does not continue. That is a hard fact, but it is also a profound one. There is something almost poetic in realizing that your consciousness is a temporary arrangement of matter capable of experiencing the universe. For a brief period, your neurons, molecules, and atoms align in such a way that the universe becomes aware of itself through you. You are not eternal in the traditional sense, but you are a singular, unique instance of awareness, a lens through which reality is observed. That lens does not linger after the underlying structure collapses, but the fact that it existed at all is remarkable. Life is an incredibly improbable phenomenon. Consciousness is even more improbable. The universe gave rise to this fleeting experience, and there is nothing in the laws of physics that diminishes its significance. Science also teaches us why the illusion of continuity feels so compelling. The brain evolved to maintain a narrative, to create a sense of self that persists over time. Memory allows you to project yourself into the future, anticipate consequences, and learn from the past. This continuity makes life intelligible, but it also fools us into imagining that the self can persist beyond death. In reality, the brain is a physical system. Its patterns exist only while the system functions. Once it stops, those patterns dissipate irreversibly. Any belief in survival beyond death is comforting, but it has no grounding in observable reality. Understanding this does not make existence meaningless. On the contrary, it makes every experience more precious. Every sensation, every relationship, every thought, and every insight is unique and irreplaceable. You are the only version of yourself that will ever exist at this moment in time in this universe. The impermanence of consciousness magnifies its value. Science strips away comforting myths, but it replaces them with awe, inspiring truth that you are a rare, fleeting spark of awareness in an indifferent, vast universe. The fact that the self is finite does not diminish its importance. It means that life, awareness, and experience are profoundly rare and precious. Every moment of consciousness is a miracle of physics, chemistry, and biology, a temporary alignment of matter and energy that produces meaning and perception. From this perspective, death is not a tragedy. It is the natural conclusion to a process that allowed consciousness to exist at all. You may not go anywhere, but for a brief instant, The universe observed itself through you, and that is astonishing. So where does your soul go? If you define the soul as the self-aware you, science suggests it doesn't go anywhere. It ends. That can feel terrifying, even unfair. We are wired to want continuity, to believe that the part of us that experiences the world might survive in some form. But when we strip away comforting myths and examine the universe honestly, the evidence points to a simple, yet astonishing truth that your consciousness is a temporary phenomenon arising from the precise arrangement and activity of matter in your brain. When the brain stops, the experience of being you stops too. And yet, this truth is not grim. It is liberating in a strange, unexpected way. If consciousness is finite and fragile, it also becomes infinitely precious. Every thought you have, every perception, every connection with another human being is unique. It will never happen again in exactly the same way. The universe has given you a fleeting opportunity to experience itself, and that alone is extraordinary. There is a kind of cosmic beauty in realizing that your awareness, though impermanent, is a rare alignment of matter capable of reflecting on itself. For a brief moment, the universe is conscious through you. That is profound even without an afterlife. This perspective also reframes how we think about value and meaning. If nothing survives death, if the self ceases, then the significance of existence is not deferred to some future realm. It is here, now, in every moment you are alive. The finite nature of consciousness gives your experiences intensity. A sunset is more breathtaking, a conversation more meaningful, a touch more real, because you know that these moments are not infinite. The temporary nature of life makes each experience a singular event, a miracle of physics and chemistry manifesting as awareness. You are alive in a universe that is largely indifferent, and yet, through you, the universe is aware of itself. That is a privilege beyond measure. There is also a humbling lesson in this understanding. Science does not provide a safety net of immortality, nor does it promise comfort in the face of death. Instead, it gives clarity reality is impartial, precise, and consistent. It does not bend to desire or hope. It does not grant exceptions for sentiment or wishful thinking. And yet, it also produces phenomena that are remarkable, inexplicable in their elegance, and profoundly moving. Consciousness itself, arising from atoms obeying the laws of physics, is one of those phenomena. That is the terrifying, beautiful discovery Feynman would have celebrated. The universe does not owe you permanence, but it has given you the extraordinary chance to exist at all. Understanding this changes the way we see life. We no longer look for meaning beyond the observable world. We look at the world itself and recognize the wonder inherent in it. We begin to appreciate the brief, fleeting spark of awareness that is our own consciousness. We see that death is not an enemy to be avoided, but the natural conclusion to a process that allowed something incredible to exist. The soul in this light is not a ghost that drifts into eternity. It is the finite, radiant spark of life, the conscious moment that allows the universe to know itself. And knowing this, we can live with awe, clarity, and an understanding of how remarkable it is that we exist even for a moment. Even though science tells us that consciousness ceases with the brain, this does not diminish the depth or richness of experience while we are alive. In fact, understanding the finality of consciousness makes the present moment more vivid, more significant. Imagine for a moment that you are holding a drop of water in your hand. For an instant, it is perfect, complete, and unique. If you release it, the drop disperses into countless smaller droplets. The water itself persists, joining rivers, oceans, clouds, but the exact shape, the exact configuration that existed in your hand is gone forever. Consciousness is like that drop, a temporary, delicate form in which the universe experiences itself. Once it disperses, it never takes that shape again. Recognizing this is not depressing. It is a call to attention, a way to see life with sharper clarity. This perspective also reframes our relationship with mortality. Humans are deeply uncomfortable with impermanence because it strips away illusions of control. We are accustomed to thinking of ourselves as continuous beings, capable of shaping the future indefinitely. But the universe is impartial. The laws of physics do not provide exceptions for individual desire or fear. Every living system, including your brain, is subject to entropy, decay, and dissolution. Death is not an adversary, it is a natural consequence of the physical rules that allow consciousness to exist at all. By confronting the impermanence of the self directly, we align our expectations with reality, and in doing so, we free ourselves from futile fears while appreciating the fleeting miracle of existence. Another striking insight emerges when we consider the connections between consciousness and the wider universe. The atoms that make up your brain, your body, and even your thoughts were forged in the hearts of stars. The carbon in your cells, the calcium in your bones, the iron in your blood, all of it is ancient stardust, recycled through billions of years of cosmic history. You are a physical continuation of the universe itself, organized in such a way that the universe can reflect on itself. This does not make you eternal, but it does make you extraordinary. The temporary nature of consciousness is what allows it to be a precise, unique lens through which the cosmos becomes aware of its own existence. Recognizing the impermanence of consciousness also changes how we view meaning. If there is no afterlife, no continuation of the self, then meaning is not something deferred. It exists here in every thought, every sensation, every action. The very finitude of awareness gives each experience a weight that it could not otherwise have. A single laugh, a single act of kindness, a single insight becomes more luminous precisely because it is fleeting. The temporary spark of awareness, the soul, in this scientific sense is finite, but it is infinitely precious. Ultimately, understanding the impermanence of consciousness invites us to embrace life fully, without illusions and with awe. We are not ghosts in search of eternity. We are temporary arrangements of matter capable of experiencing beauty, understanding, and wonder. The universe does not grant us permanence, but it does grant us the miracle of awareness. And within that fleeting moment, we have everything we need to see the world, to learn, to marvel, and to be profoundly alive. Our soul, if we insist on calling it that, is the awareness itself, bright and ephemeral, a tiny spark of the cosmos reflecting on its own existence. Thinking about consciousness in this way forces us to reconsider what it means to exist at all. We often take life for granted, as if awareness is ordinary, something guaranteed. But science shows that consciousness is extraordinarily fragile and improbable. It depends on an intricate balance of chemical reactions, electrical signals, and precise structural arrangements that have been shaped over billions of years of evolution. Even the slightest disruption, a missing molecule, a misfiring neuron, can erase awareness instantly. The fact that you are conscious now is not inevitable. It is a rare, fleeting alignment of matter that allows the universe to experience itself. Every heartbeat, every thought, every perception is a temporary miracle. The finite nature of consciousness also reframes how we think about responsibility and action. If the self is impermanent, then the significance of what we do is compressed into the brief span of life. There is no continuation where errors or inaction can be corrected later. There is no cosmic ledger where unfinished business is reconciled. Instead, every choice, every action, every word we speak carries its full weight in the moment. The universe does not record our intentions separately from their consequences. The impact of our actions exists only in the interactions and effects we create while we are alive. Recognizing this can feel daunting, but it is also empowering. It forces us to confront reality as it is and to act with awareness, precision, and care. This perspective also highlights the profound connection between life and the universe. The atoms that make up your body have passed through countless stars, planets, and living organisms. You are the result of an immense chain of physical events stretching from the Big Bang to this very moment. Within you, the universe has organized itself in such a way that it can reflect on its own structure. Consciousness, then, is a temporary lens through which the cosmos observes itself. It is not eternal, but it is singular and remarkable. In the brief moment of life, your awareness participates in the unfolding story of the universe itself. That is the closest we can come to immortality, not surviving death, but embodying the universe's capacity to experience and reflect, however fleetingly. Thinking about life this way changes the way we value experience. Immortality is not necessary for meaning. The temporary spark of consciousness is already enough to make every sensation, every relationship, and every thought precious. A moment of joy is more vibrant because it will end. A conversation is more profound because it is limited. The beauty of life emerges from its impermanence. We often spend our time chasing eternal legacies, but the reality is that meaning arises in the now, in the fleeting moments of awareness that are uniquely ours. Ultimately, this understanding of consciousness as a temporary phenomenon invites both humility and awe. It reminds us that the universe does not cater to our desire for permanence, but it has given us the extraordinary gift of awareness. The soul is not a mystical entity that drifts beyond death. It is the conscious experience itself, arising from matter and energy, brilliant and ephemeral, a fleeting but profound spark through which the cosmos can know itself. Accepting this truth changes how we live. It encourages us to see life not as a rehearsal for eternity, but as the full, vibrant experience it truly is. Every sensation, every thought, every moment of reflection is part of something astonishing, the temporary, radiant unfolding of consciousness in a universe that, while indifferent, is capable of producing awareness itself. Once we accept that consciousness is a temporary arrangement of matter, it changes how we perceive the universe and our place in it. For most of human history, people have assumed that the self must persist in some form, whether in memory, spirit, or soul. We create elaborate narratives about life after death, continuity beyond the body, or reincarnation. But science forces us to confront the possibility that these narratives are comforting fictions. The reality is that the mind, as we experience it, is inseparable from the living brain. It exists because of the complex interactions of neurons, chemicals, and electrical signals. When the brain ceases to function, the pattern that constitutes you vanishes irreversibly. There is no evidence to suggest otherwise, and no mechanism known to physics or biology allows for a continuation of subjective awareness. The finality of consciousness is difficult to face because it touches the deepest human fears, the fear of non-existence, the fear of losing identity, and the fear that everything we value may eventually disappear. Yet paradoxically, this same finality can intensify the richness of life. Imagine a rare flower that blooms only for a few hours each year. Its beauty is heightened precisely because it is temporary and fragile. Consciousness is like that flower. Its impermanence does not diminish its wonder, it magnifies it. Every thought, sensation, emotion, and insight is a unique phenomenon that will never occur in the same way again. Recognizing this encourages us to live fully, to engage with reality as it is, and to appreciate the extraordinary miracle of simply being alive. There is also a profound interconnectedness in understanding consciousness in physical terms. Every atom in your body has a story that predates you by billions of years. Carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, calcium, and iron, elements that make up your cells, were forged in the cores of ancient stars. They passed through countless cycles of matter, through oceans, rocks, and living organisms, until they came together to form you. Consciousness, in this sense, is not just a personal phenomenon, it is the universe reflecting on itself. For a fleeting instant, the cosmos becomes aware through you. The spark of self-awareness is ephemeral, yes, but it is also a direct expression of the universe's capacity to produce complexity and perception. That perspective is humbling, inspiring, and deeply moving. Understanding consciousness as a temporary, physical phenomenon also reframes the way we view meaning, morality, and value. If the self does not persist, then meaning cannot be postponed to some eternal realm or future existence. It must exist here, now, in the fleeting moment of awareness. Every choice, every action, every observation carries its full weight precisely because it is limited. There is no safety net, no cosmic continuation, no afterlife ledger. The temporary nature of consciousness gives life urgency, clarity, and intensity. It teaches us that the very fact of being alive, even for a brief instant, is remarkable enough to warrant our full attention, respect, and curiosity. Ultimately, the impermanence of consciousness challenges us to embrace life fully, with honesty and precision. It invites us to see ourselves not as immortal souls, but as temporary arrangements of matter capable of experiencing and reflecting on the universe. That fleeting spark of awareness, the scientific soul, is neither trivial nor small. It is a rare, miraculous phenomenon that allows the universe to know itself, if only for a moment. Appreciating this reality transforms the way we live. We begin to see every moment as irreplaceable, every experience as meaningful, and every act of perception as a privilege granted by the laws of physics. Life, in all its fragile beauty, becomes both urgent and sacred.